I always thought that my routine work in a small provincial town would be calm and carefree. I worked as a technician at a local electronics company, and my job was to repair old TVs and radios. I never thought that an ordinary day could turn into a real nightmare. One morning shift started as usual. I arrived at work, had a coffee, and started checking new orders. One of them was an old radio that needed repair. On the surface, nothing special, but the delivery address was from a remote village several miles from the city. I decided to complete this order myself to get the job done faster. When I arrived at the place, I realized that the house looked quite neglected. It was old and covered with moss, and the garden around it was overgrown and unkempt. He knocked on the door, but no one opened it. I decided to go inside. The door was not closed, so I carefully entered the house. It was dark and cold inside, but I immediately felt that something was wrong. I found the radio on an old wooden shelf in the corner of the room. It seems that it has not been used for a long time, because it was covered with a layer of dust. I started to check on him when I suddenly heard a noise in the back of the house. It was a soft crunch, like someone walking on an old floor. My heart began to pound, but I tried to stay calm. I decided to see what it could be and slowly made my way to the back of the house. When I got to the room where the sound was coming from, I found it filled with old photos and papers. The photos were very strange. Images of strangers in old-fashioned clothes. I was even more frightened by the pictures of children who looked sad and desperate. One of the photos was captioned, "The Family I Lost." Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw an old man in a dark cloak. He looked at me with a serious expression on his face, and his gaze was filled with sadness and anxiety. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said when I turned to him confused. "I didn't expect anyone to come. This house, it has its own history." I tried to ask him about the history of the house, but he just shook his head. "You don't need to know. You have to get out of here. Otherwise—" There was such anxiety in his voice that I felt goosebumps running down my spine. I decided I better leave and went back to work. But something inside me told me that I should learn more about this place. I went to the town to find information about the house and its past. And with each new clue I found, my fears grew even greater. When I returned to the town, my thoughts did not give me peace. I wondered what could be in this old house and why the old man looked so scared. I headed to the local library hoping to find something about the history of the house or its owners. The librarian, a good-natured woman named Mary, turned out to be very knowledgeable about the history of the town. I explained to her that I was looking for information on the old house, and she nodded, clearly interested. "Oh, you mean the house on the edge of town?" she asked. "This house has a sad reputation. Rumors about him have been around for a long time. Locals say he's an apparition, but few know what really happened." I told her about what I had seen inside the house and about the old man I had come across. Mary sighed and noted that she had a few stories to share that I might want to hear. "Before I begin, I must warn you," she said. "These stories can be terrifying. Many people who delve into this story are faced with unsettling events." She took me to the library archives and pulled out old newspapers and records. One of them caught my attention, an article about the disappearance of a family that once lived in this house. The article was written many years ago and described how the family disappeared without a trace. The only thing left are notes and photos. According to the records, the last days of the family were filled with strange events. They heard voices in the night and felt a presence that never left. The last posts I read were about family members trying to figure out what was going on, but to no avail. Mary also showed me a document about how the house had been sold several times, and each new owner encountered strange events and frightening situations. The last owner, as I learned, left the house after a few weeks and did not return. When I returned home, I was tormented by the thoughts of what happened in the house. I tried to check my notes and documents, but my mind kept drifting back to memories of the old man and his anxiety. I decided to go back to the house to try to find out more. Now I was prepared for any surprises, and my investigations led me to new questions that remained unanswered. Back in the house, I decided to explore the basement, which I hadn't thought about before. I found another secret room that I hadn't noticed before. The room was filled with old objects, including magazines and boxes. Amidst all this was another box of strange, handwritten documents. I opened the box and found a diary that seemed to belong to one of the missing family members. The entries in it described how the family tried to solve the mystery of the presence in the house. These were records of how they tried to break out of the trap they believed surrounded them. I was on the verge of despair, but eventually I found one written word that seemed to be the key: periodicity. This word was repeated in several entries, and it got me thinking about cycles and repetition. What could be repeated in this house? And how does this relate to my story? I felt that I was getting closer to the solution, but the more I learned, the more my fears grew. My research led me to new questions and a growing sense of dread. I decided that the next step would be to try to understand what the periodicity mentioned in the diary meant. To find out, I decided to analyze the documents and photos that I found in the secret room. After several hours of looking through the documents, I noticed one thing that was repeated in the photos. All the pictures had some differences, but they were all taken at the same time of year. It was the end of summer, the time when autumn comes. I knew the next step was to check the house for any signs that these events might be happening again around this time. I decided I needed to see what was going on in the house at the moment. Maybe there are some signals or changes that can confirm my assumptions. When I returned to the house, I brought a notebook and camera with me, hoping to capture any changes or anomalies. The evening was cold and I could feel my anxiety growing by the minute. I started to check the old rooms and the basement again, but this time I was more attentive to the details. I looked at each item and looked for any signs that might suggest that periodicity was important. As I approached the old mirror in one of the rooms, I noticed something strange. There were marks on the surface of the mirror that looked like fingerprints. It was very unusual because the mirror was covered with a layer of dust. I tried to wipe off the dust, but the marks remained. Then I felt something was wrong. The mirror reflected something other than just the room. I looked in the mirror and saw something I couldn't explain, features that weren't mine and a few images of people passing quickly in the background. My fears increased, and I decided to rest. I was sitting in silence, trying to calm down, when I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. Everything around became quiet and unfriendly. I remembered the old man I had met earlier. Maybe he knows more about what's going on in this house. I decided to try to find him again and see if he could help solve this mystery. Back at the library, I found Mary, but she didn't know where to find the old man. She mentioned that he was known as a frequent visitor to the library, but had now disappeared. Mary could not explain why he was missing, but she assured me that she would try to find out more and contact me if she found anything out. The same day, when I returned to the house, I felt that something important was happening. The windows in the room suddenly shook, and new noises began to appear inside the house. I understood that something was going on, and it had to do with the periodicity I was researching. That evening, I witnessed another disturbing event. Strange symbols appeared on the walls, similar to those in old photographs. The symbols began to glow and move involuntarily as if they were part of some larger ritual. I was on the verge of despair, but decided to continue my investigation. As I watched the symbols change, I realized that this might be the key to solving all this horror. I had to find ways to influence these events and try to stop what started in this house. My heart was beating in time with the disturbing sounds that were now echoing throughout the house. The symbols on the walls continued to pulsate with light, as if signaling some kind of threat. I realized that I was on the verge of uncovering something terrible, but the closer I got to the solution, the more fear gripped me. I began to look closely at the symbols. They seemed a strange combination of ancient runes and unfamiliar signs, as if someone was trying to depict something forgotten and secret. I photographed them, took notes, trying to understand what they meant. But every time I turned away from them, I felt someone's gaze on me. If I didn't know better, I would have thought the house had come to life and was watching me. Suddenly, the light in the room began to flicker, and I felt a sharp chill. It seemed to me that someone was breathing next to me. I turned around, but there was no one in the room. It was just the coldness that enveloped me from all sides. My mind told me I should leave, but something inside made me stay. I again turned my attention to the mirror, which had previously impressed me with its reflections. I approached him and saw that there was nothing unusual about him now, only my own face, excited and tense. But as I leaned closer, something inside me made me reach out and touch the glass. As soon as my fingers touched the cold surface of the mirror, I felt a strong jolt, as if someone had pushed me away. I flew back and fell to the floor. In the mirror, before it returned to normal, I saw a brief flash of someone's eyes staring at me from the darkness. Breathless with fear, I grabbed my camera and recorded these events on video. I wasn't sure I could explain what was going on, but I wanted proof that it wasn't just my imagination. While watching the video, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The handprint on the mirror that appeared after my fall was not mine. It was the print of a large, gnarled hand that seemed to be trying to break through the mirrored surface. I decided to leave the house, but before I did, I wanted to see one more place: the attic. I noticed a staircase leading to it and decided to climb it, even though I knew it could be dangerous. When I got to the attic, I was greeted by complete darkness and humidity. But something there caught my attention, an old broken chest standing in the corner. I went closer and opened it. Inside were more old photos, which this time seemed even more disturbing. They all showed the same moment, people standing in the shadows as if they were hiding from something. Their faces were contorted with fear and terror. Among these photos, I found another artifact, a small pendant with a strange sign similar to the symbols I saw on the walls. I took it, feeling that it mattered. Perhaps this was the key to the solution. But at the same time, I felt that this pendant carried something sinister with it. As soon as I took the pendant in my hands, strange sounds began to be heard from the attic, as if someone was running on the floor and approaching me. These were not sounds that a human could make. They were too fast and chaotic. I decided it was time to go. With the pendant in my pocket, I left the house feeling like I was approaching something incredible. But the question remained: what had I found, and could I handle what it brought? After returning home, I decided to look up more information about this sign and the pendant. Perhaps this will help to understand what forces are at work in the house and why they seek to break out. When I returned home, I couldn't shake the feeling that the pendant carried some kind of power. It was heavy in the pocket, as if it was not just a piece of metal, but something more, something with a dark history. I began to search the internet for information about the sign on the pendant, but I did not find anything concrete. All I found were references to ancient rituals and forgotten cults that supposedly could conjure up something incomprehensible. Late at night, as I sat in front of the computer, my thoughts returned to the house. I realized that to find the answers, I needed to go back there again, but this time prepared for the worst. I took the flashlight, the pendant, and headed back to the house, knowing that this might be the last time I come back here. As I approached the house, the night seemed darker than usual, as if the house itself was absorbing the light. The windows were black, but inside I could feel movement. Something was waiting for me there, in the darkness. I entered the house and immediately felt that the atmosphere had changed. It felt like the walls were closing in on me, and every sound was getting louder. I decided to go up to the attic where I found the pendant, believing that this place might give me some answers. When I was in the attic, the light of the flashlight began to flicker, and I heard the same strange sounds I had heard before. Footsteps coming towards me, but this time I didn't run away. I took out the pendant and held it close to my chest as if for protection. Suddenly, the sounds stopped, and a shadow appeared in front of me, dark, indistinct, but with clearly defined contours of a person. The shadow moved closer to me, and I felt a chill that pierced my bones. She was looking at me, but not with her eyes. It was more like she could see me completely, inside and out. The shadow reached for the pendant, and at that moment I realized that the pendant was more than just a thing. It was the key that kept the shadow in this house, kept her trapped between two worlds. And now the shadow wanted to free itself. I realized that if I gave the shadow a pendant, it would break out, and this could lead to dire consequences. But I also knew that the only way to stop it was to return the pendant to the chest from which I had taken it. Gathering all my strength, I rushed to the chest and tried with all my might to open it. The shadow was getting closer, and I could feel its cold breath on my neck. Eventually, I opened the chest and dropped the pendant inside. As soon as the pendant fell into the chest, the shadow stopped. She could no longer move, as if she was bound by some force. I quickly closed the chest, and the shadow vanished, dissolving into thin air, leaving only silence behind. I sat on the floor, breathing hard, but I felt like it was over. The pendant no longer had power, and the house was empty and quiet again. I left the attic, leaving everything as it was, and left the house feeling that I would never come back here again. From that day on, I no longer felt the need to explore this house. I knew that the story I had uncovered had to remain closed, like that chest in the attic. And while I didn't have all the answers, I did know one thing. Some things are better left untouched, and old secrets shouldn't be dug up, especially if they involve forces we don't understand. That was my last visit to that house, and since then I have heard no more stories about it. No one disappeared, and no one tried to unravel its secrets. And although I knew the house was still there, it was now only in my memory, like a terrible nightmare that was thankfully over.